The last part to transformations is reflections. This is the fourth of the 4 transformations. And reflections are pretty much going to be flipping over a given line. This year, we are only flipping over the X and Y axis. In the future, you will flip over additional lines, but for this year, we just use the X and Y axis. In a reflection, the original shape will not change size or shape. It's just going to move to a new location the way translations and rotations did. In looking at number 1, we are asked to create a pre-image by graphing, labeling, and connecting the following points, A, B, and C. If you want, go ahead and pause now because mine's just going to appear. Now, hopefully you have used straight lines or straight edges to help and make sure that it looks prettier than mine does since I freehanded it. Now, it says to use a piece of patty paper and a straight edge to trace the original figure. If you still have your patty paper, you can use it, or you can just use a regular sheet of paper. And what you're going to do is you're going to flip it over the y-axis, meaning every point, A, B, and C, should be the same distance from the y-axis, but on the other side, meaning we're located in quadrant 2, we're going to go to quadrant 1. So looking at this, we note that point A is 1, 2, 3 spots away from the y-axis to the left. So A prime would be 1, 2, 3 spots away from the y-axis on the right. B prime is 1, 2, 3 spots away from the y-axis on the left. Or excuse me, B is 3 spots away from the y-axis on the left. So B prime is 1, 2, 3 spaces away from the y-axis on the right. C is 7 spots away from the y-axis on the left. So C prime is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spots away, or 7 spaces away from the y-axis on the right. And then we use our straight edge to create our triangle for our reflection. And I'm sure yours looks a lot prettier because you used the straight edge. Now we are asked to go ahead and record the new coordinates. So -3, 2 is where A was. Hopefully you can see that A prime is at 3, 2. And B was at -3, 6. B prime is at 3, 6. C was at -7, 2. So C prime is at 7, 2. What do you notice? The X coordinate's now positive. Now we're going to take a look at example 2 on page 27. We're asked to create a pre-image by graphing, labeling, and connecting the following points. Go ahead, pause the video so that you can make your figure. Ta-da! And yours better look a lot better than mine does, given that I did not use a straight edge and you did. And once again, we're asked to use patty paper, so if you can fit a third figure on there, great. If not, don't worry about it. You can use another sheet of paper, or you can just do the counting method that we did. We're going to once again flip over the y-axis. So we start with point R. We notice that we are 1, 2, 3 points away from the y-axis on the right. So now we're going to go 1, 2, 3 points away from the y-axis on the left. And for point N, we notice we are 1, 2, or point T, I mean. We notice that we are 1, 2, 3 points away on the right from the y-axis. So we go 1, 2, 3 spaces away from the y-axis on the left. For point N, we notice we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces away from the y-axis on the right. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces away from the y-axis on the left. And for point Q, we notice we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces away from the y-axis on the right. And we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces away from the y-axis on the left. We use our straight edge to connect our figures. And now we have our pre-image and our image. We are asked to list the coordinates for the pre-image and the image. Hopefully you've noted that point R at 3, 2, R prime is at negative 3, 2. T was at 3, 6, T prime is at negative 3, 6. N was at 8, 1, N prime is at negative 8, 1. Q prime was at 8, 8, or excuse me, Q was at 8, 8, Q prime is at negative 8, 8. What happened to our coordinates when we went across the y-axis, when we reflected across the y-axis? We should note that the x coordinates are now negative. Now we're going to take a look at example 3 on page 28. We're using the same triangle as example 1, so we won't need to trace it again if you've traced it, because this time we're going to end up reflecting over the x-axis instead of the y-axis. Go ahead and plot triangle ABC now. So now we're going to flip over. This time instead of the y-axis, we're going to flip over. We're going to reflect over the x-axis. We go through the same process that we did for the y-axis. So starting at point A, we're going to count how far away from the x-axis is point A. We notice that it's 1, 2 spaces away from the x-axis above, so we're going to go 1, 2, and go 2 spaces below the x-axis below. For B, we note that it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces above the x-axis, and therefore B prime will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces below the x-axis. We note that C is 2 spaces above the x-axis, therefore C prime would be 2 spaces below the x-axis. And then we use our straight edge to draw our triangle. And now you have reflected triangle ABC over the x-axis. We come down here and we list our coordinates. We note that A prime is, if A was at negative 3, 2, A prime is at negative 3, negative 2. And B prime would be at negative 3, negative 6. C prime would be at negative 7, negative 2. And what did we notice happened? The y coordinate is now negative. So for this triangle, when we reflected over the y-axis, the x-coordinate changed because we made a horizontal change. When we reflected over the y-axis, or the x-axis, we made a vertical change, and therefore the y-coordinate changed signs. Let's see if this is true for a quadrilateral, the same one that we used for example 2. Now we're going to go ahead and do example 4. This is not example 2. Typo. So we're going to do example 4. We are asked to create the same quadrilateral RT and Q. So right now, go ahead and pause and create your quadrilateral. Ta-da! Now we got a quadrilateral RT and Q. Now, if you used the patty paper before when you flipped it, you're more than welcome to use it again. However, the other way you can do it is to just count. Point R is 2 spaces away from the x-axis, so R prime is going to be 1, 2 spaces away from the x-axis, but this time we're going to go down. T is located 6 spaces above the x-axis, so T prime is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces below the x-axis. N is located 1 spot away from the x-axis. N prime will be 1 space below the x-axis. And Q prime is located 8 spaces above the x-axis. Excuse me, Q is located 8 spaces away, 8 spaces above on the x-axis. So Q prime will be located 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces below the x-axis. And now we have reflected the quadrilateral RT and Q over the x-axis. We are asked to fill in the coordinates for our prime points, the coordinates for our image. We note that R prime is at location 3, negative 2. T prime is at 3, negative 6. N prime is at 8, negative 1. And Q prime is at 8, negative 8. Hopefully you've noticed that once again, the y coordinate has changed signs and is now negative. Again, we made a vertical flip. We reflected vertically. We came down, and because we came down, all the y-axes, all the y-coordinates are going to change to negatives. The final thing we need to do is go ahead and fill in what the rule for reflections are. The rule for reflections is when a figure is reflected over the y-axis, the y part of each coordinate stays the same. And the x part of each coordinate changes signs. The reason for this is because this is a horizontal change. Whereas when you reflect over the x-axis, that's going to be a vertical change. So the x part of each coordinate stays the same. And the y part of each coordinate changes signs. Now you have completed the 4 different types of transformations. We only have one thing left to do, and that's a matter of combining it all together. And that's what the next video will show.